Hello and welcome to the SecKit Go CoreXY 3D printer big build part 3. I'm sorry. Yeah. Hi everybody. Now in this episode we are going to be dealing with electronics. Now before we go any further, I just want to do a little disclaimer here. If you blow yourself up, if you electrocute your cat, if your hair starts standing on end halfway through this, if you fry your main board, your screen or anything, I am not responsible. I'm not responsible for anything in life. So I'm certainly not responsible for you setting light to yourself or burning all your hair off through touching mains electricity. Seriously, please be careful. If you're not 100% happy with what you're doing, get a friend who, may be into electronics or maybe an electrician to come and help you out. Double check and triple check all your wiring before you turn anything on, because once you've turned that power on, if you've got something wrong, your board's fried, your screen's fried, you're fried. So now we've got that out of the way, let's get on with the build. One thing, extra tool you may need in this video: a rolling pin. Now apparently I thought this was a weapon, because the only time I ever saw this used was by my mother or my father, but apparently it's meant for rolling things flat. So we'll get straight into the video and we'll see how we use it. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is have a look at your hot plate. Now as you see in the description, you can have this set up two separate ways. I'm going with the way that the heat bed would sit normally. So as you can see there, that's the terminals where you would wire it in if you were using this in its original state, but then with my heat pad I'm going to put mine on the same way, like that. So it's just as it would be if it was using the original terminals. Now in my case I also have the adhesive magnetic build plate with the sticker, so I need to turn mine over. Let's see if we can get the camera to focus. And then I have my magnetic backing for my build surface to put on, like so, and then when we come to start printing, my textured magnetic plate will sit on like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit this first, as it does suggest in the description. So I'm going to line it up roughly to where I think it is sort of fairly square. I mean, if you want to go down the route of using your micrometer and getting it absolutely spot on, by all means do so, knock yourself out, but I'm not that bothered. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a Sharpie, or you can use any other felt tip pen or a pencil, and I am going to mark a little line down this side. Now the reason for that is, I know it's put a nasty mark on my metal surface, but I'm really not that bothered. The reason for that is when you come to stick it down, you're going to peel the surface off the back like that, and then you're going to line it up with that line like so, and then peel the backing off and lay it down. So that just gives me an edge to work to, like that, while I start doing the peeling off. So let me get the corner of that peeled and we'll get that fitted on. Now at this stage you want to make sure that your aluminium plate is clean. A little bit of 99.9% IPA or 100% IPA on a little cloth, give it a wipe over, make sure you get any grease off it that may have been on your fingers from when you were doing your oiling your lead screws or your linear rails. So yeah, just make sure that this build surface is free of oil or dust or grease or nasty stuff, no lumps in it, no bits of grit on it, anything like that, before you go any further. And then you just need to take your backing you need to just bring it over a little bit like that. We're going to set it onto my line like so, and then I'm going to do that, and this is where the roller comes in useful. You don't actually need to roll it, you just do that with it over the surface of the bed as you bring it forward. That way you're making sure you're getting no air bubbles in. As you slowly pull the backing paper away and you're sticking it down, and that makes sure you get a good solid fit of the magnetic plate as you bring it forward. No air bubbles, very important, no air bubbles. Not so much with the magnetic build surface, but when we turn it over and do the heat pad on the back, you must make sure you have no air bubbles in. Apart from anything else, it means you'll get hot spots and cold spots when you have your heater on, which isn't good. Just put a little bit more of that like that. Just keep going. I mean, you can use a tin can or a bottle, a wine bottle, gin bottle, vodka bottle. Better if they're full, but we don't have any of those in our house, they're all empty. So rolling pin was the best thing to hand. Just keep going, keep making sure you get that nicely down. Of course, this is also why it's important to make sure you get that edge straight, because otherwise you might get all the way to here and find you're going off at a diagonal angle and it doesn't fit on your build plate properly, and then you've got to try and get that sticky back off. And believe you me, that isn't an easy task. But that is your magnetic plate fitted beautifully to the top of your build surface, and then when you come to do your printing, that sits on like that, but square ish, like so. So that's fantastic. And now what we'll do is we'll flip it over and we'll do exactly the same with the heat pad, exactly the same system, just to make sure we get it on nice and neat and sorted. So now with your build plate flipped over, we're going to take the heat pad. We're going to do the same thing exactly with the heat pad. The only difference here is, of course, using a black marker pen on a black surface isn't going to be much use to you. But what I have noticed is, if I can get the camera to focus, if you look at the top 2 points of this triangle and the bottom 2 lines of this triangle, when you get the heat mat something like in place, you will see, or maybe you won't because I don't know whether you can notice, but if I just lift that up, you'll see those 2 lines there at the bottom of the triangle. If you pull those flush like that and then look at this end, you've got your 2 top points. So that's your top line and that's your bottom line, so you can set it up fairly well from there. You'll also notice that the bottom corners of the triangle there line up with the bottom corner of the heat mat. So if you set it up like that, you can see it is slightly high to one end. It just depends how determined you are to get it absolutely dead center. I'm just using that as a guide in this case, and then it's the same process again. We roll the mat out, making sure we keep any bubbles out. Please notice you have cables running into here and into here. One of these is your thermistor, which is this black one here. Please make sure you don't crush your thermistor by putting too much pressure on it. Work round it when you get to it. Maybe use your fingers or lightly with the roller just to make sure the mat's down, but don't go braying at it with anything. If you crush your thermistor, you've got problems. So let's get that on. So carefully line it up. Get your top edge stuck. Make sure you're happy with it, your positioning before you go any further, because once you're done, you're done. At this stage, if you want to just lay it flat like that and make sure you're level all the way around, I'm actually slightly off to one side there, so I'm just going to attempt to lift this corner slightly. As you can see, once it starts to stick, you're going to struggle to get it right. So there we go again, making sure I'm as near as darn it square and level. I'm fairly pleased with that. So let's get that top edge on, then lift underneath, get hold of the backing, pull the backing towards you. At the same time, I'm actually rolling this time, channeling my mother, making pastry. Again, to make sure no air bubbles, no dirt underneath. Be careful around your thermistor. Pull the sheet out a bit more. Put the rolling pin back. Pull the backing sheet a little more. Again, no need to rush. If you rush, that's where you make mistakes. That's where you'll get your air bubbles and you'll have trouble. You can see how tight I'm getting it to the backing paper by the force I'm having to use to pull the backing paper off. That's making sure that everything is absolutely right. As you can see, I'm rolling either side of this wire rather than rolling over the top of it. That in theory will bring it down. You can see I'm about here now with the pull. Pull it a little bit more. Get that roller working. Make sure you keep all the air bubbles out as nice and as smooth as you can. Coming up to the connections now for the heater. Again, don't apply too much pressure over the top of that. You'd hate to do that any damage after getting this far. Pull forward a bit more. Roller again. And then final bit. Probably better to do smaller sections as you get towards the end so you don't get a large bit suddenly going blop and coming off. So we'll go right to there like that. Roller that. Like so. Final bit. And off it comes. Roll that flat. Roll that flat. Make sure that's all down like so. Check all your edges. Like that. And there you go. One heat pad. Well put on. No air bubbles, no lifting, no nothing. Magnetic plate on the other side. No lifting, no air bubbles, no nothing. Done. Let's get on to the next stage. So now we move on to the next stage. Because you built this some time ago, it's always worth checking now that you haven't knocked any of these out of alignment and you haven't got any twist on the frame. Because you've only got these brackets in the corners, it is possible that they can twist slightly while you've set it to one side. So just go around and double check it is still flat and level. If it's not, just loosen off the necessary bolts, push it flat and tighten them back up again. So the next thing we need to notice is the fact that we have these offset holes here and here, and then these ones here. So in my case, you've got the two front ones, which are going to be the two front bed leveling screws, and then you've got this one here, which is my rear bed leveling screw. And like I say, it is just slightly offset to this side, so just need to make sure that that's how you've got it. If you wanted the orientation the same as it is on the diagram, it would be the other way around, but it's just I'm using my overhead camera for this, so it's inverted it. So yeah, just make sure that you're picking the screw that's offset to the right hand side as your back one, and then you've two front ones there. I have noticed on the forums that some people have changed it and they've put 4 on and drilled it for that, or 6 or 8. Now we may do that in the future, but at this stage we're sticking to what the manual says and we're going with the standard build. All the upgrades and updates will be done in future videos if I don't die of coronavirus in the meantime. So this is the little parts bag containing everything you need for the bed levelling. You've got the M3x45 countersunk bolts in there, the M3 nuts, the I don't know whether the washers are in there. The washers aren't in there. The washers will be in the pack. We'll dig those out in a moment. The butterfly nuts and the springs are in there though, so we'll just dig out the necessary washers and we'll get this built together. So very simply, as you can see in the photograph here and the diagram here, we're going to put the bolts through the aluminium bed, tighten the M3 nut up against it, and then you have the M4 washer, then the spring on, then that sits through the aluminium extrusion there, and then you put your other M4 washer underneath, and then your butterfly nut or wing nut goes onto there. So we'll do the front two corners first. So we've got bolt in like that, nut on the bottom, very fiddly when you've got fat hands like me to get that nut on square, but once it's on square you just spin that up. Now you can make this as tight as you like, because this is a permanent fixing like this. Any alterations you'll do from the wing nut at the bottom, so the tighter you get this really the better, because you do not want this bolt turning when you're trying to turn the wing nut, because that's just annoying. I mean, you can always put an Allen bolt in the top there to tighten it down while doing the bottom, but if you can get this tight to start with, it just saves all that aggro and a hassle. Of course, if I had the right Allen key to hand, that would help. This is going to do it. No, I've not bought the right one with me, so we'll just do a quick jump cut while I grab the right one and we'll carry on. There you go, the quality jump cut there. So we've got the right thing now. We can tighten that up nice and tight like that. We'll do the same on the front corner here, and then we'll do the same for the back corner as well, and then we'll come back. So now we have those three in place. Top tip for fitting the next section: lay that down that way, we'll put the washers on, we'll put the springs on, and then we'll actually lower this onto there and put the washer and the springs on from this side, because it's a whole load easier. So your washers in each corner, 1, 2, 3, then your springs on, 1, 2, 3. Get your surface, make sure everything is the right way around. Those bolts should just drop through, a little bit of wiggling to get them lined up like that, so you've got all those three on, and then your other three M4 washers, and you just need to put it under a little bit of tension to get your wing nut on like that, and then the same on this one. Like that, and then the same finally on the single one, which will be your back one, with the orientation that I'm using and the setup that I'm using. That goes on like that. Now if you tighten them all down just so they're flush with the top of the wing nuts, you then know that you've got equal tension on all three leveling points, therefore you're not twisting anything, you're not twisting the build plate or your frame, it's all under equal tension because you've got your wing nuts all tightened the same amount, and we'll put that to one side and we'll carry on. So we simply put your M4x8 bolts through the plates with your T-nuts on, making sure your T-nuts are running the right direction to accept the extrusions from your build surface. Feed your cables through and out of the way, like so. And you just need to sit those onto your T-nuts. Slide your build plate back. We will set this up squarely later on, but you need to make sure that the front of your build plate here does not come beyond the front of your frame here. You also will need to, at some point, you need to slide the whole frame this direction so that your start point for your nozzle is in the right place, but that can all be adjusted later. For now, all we're going to do is to get it so the T-nuts grip the build plate and it doesn't fall off. So now you've got it like that. Trusty wow stick underneath again. Tighten those up. And that's your bed frame in place for now. Just a little addendum at this point. If you want to make sure at this stage that you have got your build surface perpendicular to your frame, if you lower your lead screws down until you've got your frame there level with your frame here, and you've got your gap all the way along, you can then measure that with your calipers or a tape measure, or you could even use your plastic guide. If you actually do that, you can check and see that you've got the same distance all the way across the front. That then tells you that your bed is square to the front of your frame, which means that everything should be good for later on. So this is my bench vise. It's by a company called Ptfe. I got it from Aldi, I think. And basically all I've done is I've put the centre section and the two side sections into the vise and just carefully nipped it up just so it started gripping, making sure I still have enough flex in it to open it up like that to feed the stepper motor in. We'll go and put this back on the frame, put the bolts back in, drop the stepper motor in, and then slowly tighten up the four corners with the bolts and the inserts, and hopefully that will nip it up without causing too many issues. Another little addendum: if you find that you can't get your nut on the back of your M3 bolt, if you have some longer M3 bolts, which I just happen to have lying about, put those on, use those to pull your edges in. It just saves, I could have just about get the nut on, but I was a little bit concerned about stripping it. So like I say, I've put these longer M3 bolts in I had in my spares department, which means I can nip those up now to such a point that the original bolts will fit through, and I'll have plenty of thread on the back to get the nut on. So now we move on to the belts. As you can see, we are provided with a 6mm GT2 belt. This is approximately 2 meters in length. Now what I suggest you do is you test fit your belt around all the pulleys. Don't get it too tight, but do it all when you've got the belt in one piece. Mark the belt where it will feed through the plate here, and you would snip it, and then check that you have enough left on the rest of the belt to do this section here. Because what you don't want to do is to do this, cut it, and then find you haven't got enough left to do that, or cut it in half and find that you've got enough to do that one but not enough to do this one. So that's the first thing I suggest you do. I've done that, I've checked it, and I've made sure that I can cut the belt right down the middle, and it'll give me two belts of a perfect length to run around the system. Also note, they suggest trimming the belt at a slight angle of the top, just so it feeds through the slotted parts of the plate easier, I find that if you push it through and then get a pair of pliers on the back and just give it a little pull, it pulls it through a lot easier than trying to do it with your finger ends. So let's get back to the machine and I'll actually show the fitting of those belts. So if we follow the path of this lower belt, you see it starts here, tooth to tooth, 2 cable ties on. I'll snip those off in a minute and maybe shorten that a little. We come along the belt here, it goes around the back side of that pulley, comes around the front, goes along the front of that toothed pulley, runs down around the tooth pulley on the stepper motor, making sure the stepper motor is loose, so the stepper motor is all the way forward, so when you come to tension it you can push back on the stepper motor, thus tensioning the belt. So it comes round, comes across here. Now across here we have a twist in the belt. As you can see, the teeth are facing here and then they turn over in the middle, so there's your twist, and then it goes around the bottom pulley there, so the teeth are now on the outside of the belt. As it comes down here, round to this pulley, and then we go along and through the lower slot in the front there, we've got tooth to tooth again, so we'll put 2 cable ties onto there and then snip the end of that one off, and that's the lower belt on. I've got a fair amount of tension on it on the moment, but like I say, we will be tightening that by pushing the stepper motor back, which will then put the whole lot under tension, but we'll cover that in a moment. Let's get this snipped up and shortened, and then we'll go do the higher one. We'll come back, look at that, and then we'll move on. So now we'll check the path of the upper pulley against the diagram. So teeth facing, clips on, go around this top pulley, down along here, around that pulley, a twist in here, so the teeth go from the outside to the inside here, then they go around that pulley, round that stepper motor, come down here with the teeth on the inside still, along here, around this pulley at the end. That's a teethed pulley, so make sure your teeth are on the inside to go around that. Then round this pulley here, back, terminates on the top slot at this side here, 2 cable ties on, and then we'll just nip that back there, and that's that section done. What we need to do when we've done that, we'll come back and we'll check the height of the 2 pulleys on these rear stepper motors to make sure that they're sitting right and that we have no binding issues with the height of those pulleys in relation to everything else. So pulling this right hand pulley, which is this one here, backwards and forwards, you can see that it's riding a little bit high. You can see the belt going up and down, which means it's a little bit high on the stepper motor behind here. Get you a shot. So I need to get to the Allen key, drop that cog a little, which will drop that belt on that pulley a little, which will make it run smoother. In the instruction manual, it basically says go and find a different resource on how to build your direct drive hot end. Well, let's help you out with that. Let's get this one put together before we fit it to the machine. So let's start by building this E3D V6 style hot end. Simple enough to do. It must be, because I can do it. First, get the orientation of your heater block the correct way around. So you want it so you've got the screw thread that the nozzle goes in, tapped hole above, tapped hole below, but you've got the one nearest like so. Get your nozzle, turn it just a little way in to start with, like that, not all the way. Then what we want to do is screw it all the way in, like that, and then unscrew it about a quarter turn. Then get your heat brake, screw that in until it bites on the nozzle, like that. we've got that piece like that. Insert the thermistor so it's just flush with that edge. Turn the grub screw until it just touches the thermistor, like so. And then turn it 1/8 of a turn. So you want to do it about that much, no more. You do not want to crush the thermistor, as that will cause you more trouble than it's worth. Take the bolt for your heat cartridge, bob that in, screw it up. Just do that by hand. Insert your heat cartridge. And you just want that set sort of equidistant either side, and then give that a little nip up. Again, do not over tighten it. You do not want to crush it, as that will cause you problems later on. You just want to tighten it until it slightly deforms that metal there, so as you can see it's just pushed in slightly, so the gap's narrower at this end than it is at that. No more than that, just slight deformation, so it just bends over slightly, and that's more than sufficient to hold your heater cartridge in place. Then grab your thermal grease and you just want to apply a little to the thread of the heat break. You don't need to use it all, just apply a little around the thread. Like so. You don't need to put it anywhere else but on the thread like that. And then you can screw that in. Like so. It doesn't need to be any more than finger tight. Just wind it in. There we are at finger tightness. So now you want to cut your Ptfe tube. So once it's sat all the way into the throat, it's 5mm above the top. So I've set my digital calipers to 5mm. Like so. I've got enough hands. Bend down and pick up my Sharpie. And with my Sharpie I will mark on the Ptfe tube 5mm. Get out my tube cutters, place it in. That should now be the ideal length to fit in. So once you've cut it, put it back in, carefully feed it in into place like that. There we go. So the first thing to do is to offer up the back part of the Bondtech style extruder, like so. Get your gear. You want the grub screw outermost. So put it on in that orientation like that. Holding the back plate in place, you can then make sure that you have the cog set in the right position, that it lines up with the teeth, and then you can just tighten up like so, happy in the knowledge that that is set in the correct position. And we simply offer it up to the back sure it all lines up. It should just push together. Like so. Insert the screws there, there and there right the way through so they go through the plate and into the pancake extruder motor. We'll get those three in and then we'll come back. Take your tension wheel, put your spring on, put your nylon washer on, push the gate closed, and that's up with the hole. A little bit of tension, not too much. Now you see, got a bit of movement on there. And now we'll set the fan onto here. Take the fan shroud with this curved edge to the bottom. Take your fan with the label side inward, cable to the top, and then screw the 4 screws through from this side into there. So I'll quickly do that and then we'll come back again. At this point I've actually decided to turn my fan through 90 degrees so the cable actually comes out of the side, because then it'll be easier to pick all the cables up together for cable management. But now this just simply clips over like so, and like I say, your cable management will bring everything up like that. You can re-put your fan back on the front like that, and then you can tie in this cable with those, put the extension on it, round to the back, and then we'll do the wiring. Please note at this stage the hot end is not completely tight. We'll have to do tighten up the nozzle, a final tighten, when we've got everything up to temperature. So we'll get it to about 230-250 degrees, and then we'll tighten the nozzle against the heat break again, making sure we've got a nice tight fit. Then when it cools it'll be super tight and it won't ever come undone until of course you want to change the nozzle. At this stage it's a good idea to grab your extension for your part cooling fan, clip that on, and then you can hang that over the back with all the other cables, which will eventually go into the cable management system, and we'll probably put a little bit of filament down to give it some support as it goes over the back, but we'll cover that later on. Time for a bit of a tidy up round the back, get these things plugged in. So at this stage we need to prepare the bed levelling sensor, and what you're asked to do is to cut a small section off the top of the foam here, so the nozzle when it's seated touches into the bottom of the metal plate there. Now personally I will not be using this bed levelling sensor, but as I am building the kit as it comes with the instructions, I will be putting it on for now and showing you how it works. Basically what it does is there's 2 slips of metal in there, and the nozzle pushes one piece of metal against the other piece of metal, which makes a connection which gives you the bed level. But as you can see, I've just pulled the nozzle and the block out of the pack. The problem is that the foam is too thick, so the nozzle will never touch the metal plate on the bottom. So you just need to trim a little bit off, just so when it is inserted like that you can just feel it clicking at the bottom. So we'll do that and then we'll come back. So I've chipped off there with my X-Acto knife about 1.5 millimeters of the foam, and now that sits perfectly well into the block like that. So that's now set to where we need to be. So the next job, as you can see, we need to alter the wiring on this plug slightly. So basically all we're doing is we're taking the wire out of this top point here and moving it into this middle point here. There's a tiny weeny little tab here which you push down, pull the cable out, then lift the tab up slightly so when you push it back into the middle it locks in place. Now I'll try to do this on camera. Unfortunately the screwdriver is going to get in the way, everything's pretty much going to get in the way, but I'll do my best to show you the process. So you just have to push the tab down, pull the wire out like that. There's a tiny weeny little tab on there, you probably can't see it. Just get your fingernail underneath it, lift it up slightly like so, and then you push it back into the middle one like that. Make sure it's locked in place, and it's as simple as that. Now that we're moving on to the main electrical section, I'd ask you to take a couple of minutes just to look through this, how to secure your wires safely to protect them from pulling or possibly straining connectors or such things like that. It's very important that you take notice of this to make sure that your build is done correctly and to the safest standards you possibly can. So now we're on to the wiring. Again, there is a disclaimer in this section. Please heed this warning. It's very important that you know what you're doing before you start doing this. I will not be responsible for you blowing yourself up, and neither will the producer of this kit. If you're not happy doing this, get somebody in that is. So we're down to the nitty-gritty now. This is where we start putting all the wires into the main board, through the relays, everything else. Now stop, take a break, go and grab yourself a cup of coffee, cup of tea, can of Coke, nothing alcoholic. If you're feeling a little tired, your eyes are hurting, it's all just getting a bit muddled in your head, leave it, come back another day. You don't need to carry on now, come back with a fresh head. But whatever you do, don't carry on now if you're not 100%. Having said that, I still feel fairly good, feel 100%. I can edit in and out as I see fit, so I might not be doing everything straight away. If I start to feel tired, I'll stop. I'll continue with an edit point and just come back into it. But without further ado, let's crack on, let's get into it, let's get this thing wired up. So now we've moved around to the rear of the machine, we need to familiarise ourselves with the power supply. This is a company called Meanwell, probably the best power supply maker on the market. First thing to check, is it set to the correct voltage for your country? Mine is set to 230. If you're in a country where it's 110 or 115, you would flick that down so it shows the correct voltage in the window. Like I say, in the UK it's 230, 240, so we've got it set correctly there. Looking at the front here, working from the right to the left, you have the mains voltage on the far right hand side. That's your live, your neutral and your earth of your mains voltage. That's the bit that'll kill you. Be sure you know what you're doing. Like I say, if you're in the States or somewhere else that uses 110 volt, that's your live, neutral and earth for your mains power. The next three, 1, 2, 3, are the 24 volt negative terminals, and then the last three on the left hand side, 1, 2, 3, are the 24 volt positive terminals. The little screw adjuster at the end is for adjusting the voltage to make sure it's at 24 volts. You should not need to touch that, that is set at the factory. So let's go through that just one more time. Live voltage on your right hand side, do not do that with the metal thing when it's plugged in. This is completely separate from the power supply. Don't ever touch these terminals with anything metal while there's any power to it. You've got your live, your neutral and your earth of your mains voltage. Then 1, 2, 3 negative 24 volt terminals, 1, 2, 3 positive 24 volt terminals. So first we will fit the power supply into place using 4 M4 by 8 round head bolts. As you can see, I've marked on the back panel for you where the 4 holes are. You bring the bolts in from the back and they screw in to the threaded parts here on the back of the power supply. Next we'll fit the mains voltage fuse, which looks like this. You're going to take the fuse holder out, we're going to remove this screw and it's going to be placed down there using an M4 by 10 bolt, an M4 washer. So we undo the screw like so, We remove this back plate which we don't need. Remove that screw that we don't need. Then we're going to reuse the original nut that came with it. And we're going to have a nut and a washer in there. Like that. And then we'll bring the bolt in from the other side through the bottom of the plastic and into that nut and washer. Next we will fit the solid state relay. It would appear that this could either go here or here. I think I'm going to set mine there. Please note that the relay actually sits with the writing upside down, so you have the solid connection at the top and the horseshoe shaped connection at the bottom. For this we're going to need 2 M4x10 bolts, 2 M4 nuts and 2 M4x12x1 washers. Again, I'm putting the bolt in from the other side and I'll have the nut and the washer on this side. I'm only doing that so it keeps the neat look of the other side with all the bolt heads showing through from that side and then all the nuts at this side. You can do it the other way if you want. I'm just doing it because that's the way I want to do it. So I've put the bottom bolt through and I've got the nut and the washer on this side tightened up very loosely, and because of the horseshoe shape on the bottom of here, you can now slide that down and that will locate over there like that, which makes it easier to set your top hole up with your nut, bolt and washer. And there we are with the relay in place. So with the bolts in place, I'm going to put the nylon M3x7x10 tubes over the bolts, like so. Then the motherboard will sit on like that, and then we'll put a washer and a nut on each one of those 4 bolt heads and we'll tighten up. So next is the driver cooling fan, which is that little item there, and for this we will need 2 bolts M3x20, 1 bolt M4x10, 2 M3 nuts, 1 M4 nut and 1 M4x12x1 washer. Now it would appear that using the fan that, as they suggest, you are only actually putting 2 nuts and bolts in. Now there's room for 4. I think we've got enough stuff to put 4 in. I'm going to put 4 in. The other issue is they're asking us to use the 3x20 bolts. Now those bolts do leave you quite a bit of spare thread afterwards. You might want to cut them down afterwards. You might want to go for something slightly shorter if you happen to have maybe some M3x15s, something like that. That would suit it better. They also show that the head of the bolt goes through this way, like so. Now the thing with that is this is actually shaped to take a nut, so I'm going to bring them in from the other side. Make sure the side of your fan without a guard on is facing out. Lay that onto, throw that on the floor. So the side with the printing on goes onto the back like that. I'm going to put my nuts in. I'm going to use all 4, and I'm going to bring the bolts in from the other side like that, and then simply it's a matter of bringing the M4 through the panel into here, washer on, nut on. Simple and straightforward as that. So we'll get that put together and then we'll come back to see what it looks like. And there you are with the fan in place. As you can see, those bolts, they've got a fair bit of play on those still, and like I say, if you want to get shorter bolts, or I have a set of pliers that have croppers on, I would suggest you can take possibly 7mm off those, 5mm to be on the safe side, but if you want to cut them down or get 15s rather than 20s, by all means do. Now at this stage, although it's not mentioned in the description, I would fit the power socket, which goes in this hole on the side here. So it's just a simple matter of taking it out of the packet, easy tear packet. The cables are already fitted. It's always worth having a little check just to make sure that they are well seated. Your fuse is in there, it should already be in. Rotation wise, I would have it in personally that way, although we will check that the wiring fits, but I would have it that way so the switch is near the front, so if you're reaching up the side to switch the switch off in an emergency, you're not having to come past the power socket to get to it. So I would have it in that orientation, feed the wires through like that, that sits neatly into there, those wires go through the back there. Now it also doesn't state which fixings you need. I will check in the kit. I would imagine possibly the M4x8s may work. I'll just offer one of those up and see how it looks. It appears to be a little tight, but we'll wind it in and see how much thread we have on the rear for a knot. Just enough to get a nut on the back of there, so that's what I'm going to go with. An M4x8 top and bottom. Apart from anything else, aesthetic wise it matches in with these, so it looks quite nice. So we'll put the nut on the back, just loosen that off a touch and then tighten it back up so it grips my nut. Like so. We'll do the same at the bottom and then we'll turn around and sort the wiring out. Just a little addendum for you at this point. This bottom bolt is a very small amount of space at the back here to get your fingers in to get the nut on. So what I'm going to use is I have this little set of aluminium, there's sockets, Phillips head screwdrivers, flatheads and small Allen fittings which I got from Banggood. And I'll sit the nut into that and then I can bring that in from the back like so, just get it into where I need it, which it just fits in, and I mean just and only just, and then tighten it home like that. So now to fix the wiring from the switch into the back of the power supply. The red goes to the first terminal. So unscrew the terminal, get to the flat back part of your terminal and make sure you get it behind the square washer that's on the terminal screw as well. Screw that back nice and tight. The middle one, as per the instructions, is the blue. So again, make sure that this flat part that you can't see from my fingers, the flat part of the spade connector goes to the back. Unscrew the terminal, put it behind the square washer so it sits up like that. Make sure it's all the way home. Tighten it back, and then that leaves the yellow one, which is the earth. Now with this we also have this short piece of green wire with double terminals on it. This is to earth to the chassis. Now it says screw it to the chassis. I intend on using a T-nut and a couple of washers to actually put it into the frame here. So the best way of doing this is to put these two back to back like that, and then we'll slide those two in. So loosen off the screw on the terminal block, slide the two spades up like that so they're both in, tighten them back like that, and then you have your short earth here, which as you can see sits almost perfectly there. So got a few spare T-nuts, so put a T-nut in. I think that's a 4x8 nut, a T-nut and a washer. We'll put that spade clip between the washer and the head of the bolt. Make sure that the T-nut grips to the rail, like so. And before we go any further, we're going to test that we have a good earth between the chassis here and the power supply here. So I'll bring in my little fluke meter, put it to continuity, and you'll hear a buzz like that if we get continuity. So if we pick a place on the case like that and go to the earth point now, there we go, we have continuity to the frame. That's to the one of the rails, and that's to a lead screw, so that shows that everything has an earth between there and there. If you happen to have the black anodized frame rather than the silver frame, it's suggested that you scrape off some of the black paint around the area that you're connecting the terminal, thus making sure you get a good connection to earth. But I'm more than happy that off there I'm getting an earth there off the lead screws. That's off one of the linear rails, that's off the top gantry, that's off the plates for the extruder stepper. So we've got a good earth all the way around the machine, even touching some of the nuts. That's a nut on the side of the switch there. So we've got a good earth all the way there. So I'm happy in the knowledge that that is nicely earthed to the whole of the frame, so we don't have any issues at a later date. So at this stage the manual suggests that you check your voltages. If you're happy to do so, the system is switch the power on at the switch at the side. I've got a red light on there, I have a green light on my power supply. You go across first and second terminal, and there you can see 231 volts. $230 so that's fine. So that's voltage there. Then we're going to check your low voltage DC rail. So we'll go first of the three 24 volt positives, first of the three 24 volt negatives, and there we go, 24. Second positive, second negative, 24. Third positive, third negative, 24. So we know the 240 volt rail is working fine, your input's fine, your output is fine. We've checked the earth around the machine, so we're fairly happy with the setup of the power supply at the moment. So the first thing we're going to do is get power to the motherboard. Find your 40 centimeter cables, just grab a tape measure, measure them, they're very accurate. We're going to run these cables up the back of the motherboard. Like so. And we're going into this terminal block here. We've got negative on the outside and positive on the inside, so negative on the left, positive on the right. Put it into the terminal block, screw it tightly up, unscrew the positive, push it into the terminal block, make sure you seat it all the way in, tighten it up. Don't put too much pressure on this plastic block. If you want to nip it up, put your finger against there to stop the actual block from twisting. Bring your cables down, like I say, behind the board, and these are going to go in to the positive and negative, this one here and this one here. So the positive lead, loosen off the terminal. As before, make sure that the flat back of your connector goes to the back. Make sure the square washer is in front as well. Tighten that back like that, and bring your negative cable, bring it around behind that positive like that, and that's going to the first negative terminal, which is that one there. So we loosen that one off. Let's just bring that down there to get it into place. Behind the square washer, tighten it back, carefully bring the cable up above the fuse like that, making sure you don't put too much pressure on it. You might just want to bring that back slightly. That's good, that's not too much pressure there. That can bring the cables up like that. There we go. So that's now power from the 24 volt side of your power supply into your motherboard. The next stage, we're going to bring the power 22 centimeter 20 gauge wires through and into the SSD. Again, if you're not sure if you've got the right cables, just get out your trusty tape measure. There you go, you can see there are 20 centimeter lengths. Make sure that they fit roughly. Yes, that's no problem. So again, we're going to feed those up, or you could feed them down if you feel so inclined, like so. And at the top, we're going into these two terminals here. Now bear in mind that these are the reverse of these two, so red is on the left hand side and black is on the right hand side, so positive to the left, negative to the right. Same thing again, loosen the terminal off, push the wire in, and the same with the negative. Take the cover of off your solid state relay, bring these cables down, positive goes to this terminal, negative goes to this terminal. Spade clip behind the plate like that. Tighten it home. Spade clip behind the plate like that. Tighten it home. So what we've got there is basically that is the power coming out off the board for a 12 volt bed. And what it does is it comes into the solid state relay and it literally works as a switch. So when it feels 12 volt across there, it turns on the 240 volt output, which goes to your bed. Simple, straightforward and efficient. Now at this stage, must point out that because this is AC that we're now dealing with, which is mains voltage, the direction basically there's no polarity that you need to worry about. Be aware that you are using mains voltage now. Make sure everything's switched off. Check, double check and triple check your wiring. But basically what we're going to do with these two short sections, we're going to put one from here into the fuse like that, and then one from the fuse into the live terminal there. So what that does is, that's live coming out of the power supply, going through an inline fuse and going into the mains voltage input of the relay, and then we're going to connect the heated bed, one of the cables from the heated bed, to the mains output of the relay, and the other cable from the heated bed will come through and go up to the neutral. So when the relay clicks in, that makes a connection through the fuse to the heated bed at your mains voltage. So first red cable into the input of the SSD, and into the fuse holder, tighten it up like so. Again, double check, power off. If you're in any way unsure, pull the plug out. In fact, it's probably good practice to keep this plug out in case something else on your bed happens to touch your power supply and knock it on. So remove your cable. Safety first. It's imperative to make sure that these terminals are nice and tight. You don't want any chance of arcing in any way, shape or form. Make sure all those terminals are good, strong and put together. Now we'll feed the cables through from the hotbed. Like I say, it doesn't matter which one goes where in this case, because there is no polarity, because it's AC. So we'll put one onto here, the other one will feed round and put onto the negative terminal there. So here are your two cables from your heated bed. So either one, doesn't matter which. One onto the switched side of the relay, under the plate. Screw it back like so. Good tight connection. The other one needs to come round and onto the negative. Loosen the negative up. We'll take it underneath there. In fact, we'll feed it behind that earth we've put in, like that. And then underneath that positive, like that. Loosen the terminal off. Get it slid right up. In fact, on this one, we're going to do the back-to-back. I've done the back-to-back on the live, because I had that already set up to do that, but we'll do the same with this. So the flat to the flat. As you can see, getting a little fiddly down here with fat fingers. Take your time, make sure you do it properly. go, that's both in. Screw that back down again, make sure it's good and tight. We don't want to have any loose wiring. That's tightly home. Just take that kink out the cable, don't like kinks. We'll feed that back through there, and we'll do some more cable management later, but we'll just keep it like that to try and keep it nice and neat. So that's now your heat bed wired up. So at this stage, put your cover back on. That then covers up terminals like that, so you don't lose your finger ends. It may be an idea just to snip off the plastic that's on there so it sits totally flush over the top, and the ones at the bottom as well. I may do that later on, but we'll just leave it like that for now. While we're here, we'll just pop the driver cooling fan in, which, if you look at the diagram there, is this top one here. Orientate the plug the correct way, and that just pops into there like that. Again, we shall do some cable management later. That's just nicely in there. We can also put in Thermistor for the heated bed that we pulled through, which comes in this bottom left hand corner here. Again, check your orientation. It should only go in one way, and that's it safely in like that. Next thing you need to do is to check your stepper motor cables. You actually get 4, which are combined like so, which could be a little bit confusing when you first see them, but it's basically one ribbon cable is 2 sets of stepper motors. So what you need to check is that the board side, the SKR side, from right to left is black, green, blue, red, which it is on both of those, and then the stepper motor side, you've got red on the outside, green, then blue in the middle, and then black on the left side. So mine are all right, no need to change mine at all, but if you do need to swap them round, it's exactly the same procedure as it was earlier on for moving the pin. You just push it in, pull the cable out, lift the little pin slightly so when you push it into the correct socket it clicks into place. And like I say, mine are absolutely fine. So we'll run the 1 and the 2 steppers up at the top here, and then we'll run one from the extruder and put them into the right place on the board. So plugged into the left stepper, which is the right on here, but we're looking at the back, so this is turned round. This of course with the left stepper motor, that's the right end of the cable, so that needs to go into this socket here, which says CoreXY left stepper. So that goes into there like that, which means the other one is the right stepper, which goes into the one below it there, and then that means this cable comes up and sits into there like that. Again, cable management, we'll get round to that in a bit. Next is the extruder one. So we just grab the other double cable and we need to split that. So just grab it like that, pull it apart like so. The extruder motor cable end that goes into the board, is into that socket there, and that will come up and over and in like that. And then the only one we've got left now is the one for the Z stepper. So we grab that cable, That goes in to there like that. That's the Z stepper, and then we feed that through under the bed. And although you can't see it, trust me, I am plugging it into the Z stepper motor. First lifting the bed so I can actually get to it. Like so. And then I can plug that cable into the stepper motor. Now at this point we have the stepper motors wired in. You must no longer move these stepper motors at any speed, either on the bed, any of these stepper motors at all, because they will backfeed to the board. Because they are stepper motors, they can produce electricity, a bit like a dynamo on your bicycle. So if you spin this stepper motor too quickly, it will create voltage which will feed back into the board and could blow the board. So now you've done that, no fast movement on these stepper motors in any way, shape or form. If you need to do it, unplug them first, move the stepper motor if you need to reposition the head, or do it exceedingly slowly. Do not do any quick movements from now on, now that they're plugged in. Backfeed the board, blow the board, no fun. Now it would appear that they've changed the colour of the cable for the Z minimum M stop. If you look at the picture here, it's red, black, green. The cable I have is red, black, white, but they're actually in reverse anyway. They're white, black, red. It doesn't matter as long as both ends of the plug are the same orientation, so they're both white on the left, black in the middle and red on the white. At the end of the day, it's only colours. As long as they are the same on both, it'll be perfectly alright. It plugs into that socket there. Make sure it clips home, and then the other one will go round the case up through this hole up here, and that will plug in to your Z end stop, which is located up there. Pop that in like so. Like I say, bit of cable management later on. For now, that's home and sorted. Next, we will take the cables to the screen, noting that we have EXP1 and EXP2, and making sure that on the back of the screen we plug them in the correct order. When fitting the optical Z minimum end stop, please note that the cables require changing and the jumper needs to be removed. First we will deal with the cables. The optical end stop sensor end is correct, but the end for the SKR board is the wrong way around. So as we've done before, we will swap those two pins over by pushing down on the little tab, sliding the wire out, and then swapping the two over and then pushing the wires back in, and we'll come back when we've done that. So with the wires for the board end now inverted, they can go into the optical end stop position, which we can see on the board. Z minimum M stop is there, which is this one here. So that plugs in like so, and then the other end we will feed through the top hole here, and then that can plug into the optical end stop. And then we need to remove a jumper off the board, which is the first, second, third one down, which says ZST. So check the third one down, indeed it says ZST. So it will go in, first, second, third jumper, out it comes. Put that on one side, may come in useful later, you never know. So the bed leveling sensor goes into there. The heatsink fan is this one, positive to the left, negative to the right. Make sure you get all the bare wire inside the clip. Always better if you don't have your hands in the way of what you're doing. In we go. Next, we have this one, which was the extension of the part cooling fan, and the part cooling fan, according to our data sheet, is this one here. So that goes in like so. Then we have our hot end, which is these two here. Doesn't matter which way around these goes on. It goes into this connection here. I'm just twisting the wires so we get them in neatly. Grab my screwdriver. Loosen off the terminals. Doesn't feel to be going far enough in, just lift the terminal back a little more until it seats. Tighten that one up. Same for this one, straight in. Tighten that one home. Now, as you can see, the Thermistor cables came without a plug. Fortunately, in the kit there is a plug that will go into those two connectors. Doesn't clip into place, but it is the right distance apart for the pins, so you can either fit a proper plug or you can use this. I'm going to use this. They even supplied two short lengths of heat shrink material. So I'm going to bear these wires back slightly, twist them together, solder them, and then apply the heat shrink, and then we can slot that into place. So we now have those two soldered on and heat shrunk into place. It does not matter about the polarity on the thermistor, so you can just push that onto there like that, and that's in place. Now we're going to just tidy the wires out of the way, and we're going to install the stepper drivers down through here. Just a quick note, before installing the drivers, make sure you have removed all the jumpers from the pins underneath the drivers, as they are not needed for the 2209s. You can leave the bottom ones on, as we're not using that driver anyway. Please note, after removing the jumpers off these pins here, you need to place them where it shows there and there, there and there, and there and there. Now please make sure that when you do this you are facing the board flat on, because it's very easy to misalign these jumpers and maybe just be one pin too high on this one or one pin too low on this one. It is incredibly easily done. Make sure you are absolutely square onto the board when you fit those, even if it means crouching down just to get your eye level exactly right. How do I know you can get these pins in the wrong place? Don't ask. Let's move on quickly. Then simply mount your heatsink onto your driver. Make sure you've got it the right way around. It actually says top, and if you look at the side, we've got red on there which matches up with the red on the left hand side, and black on there which matches up with the black on the right hand side. And just push your driver in, make sure it sits flat, and we'll just repeat the process for 2, 3 and 4, and that's your drivers in place. So now we need to grab the firmware and put it onto the SD card that came with the board. So we'll plug that into the computer. So now we're going to the GitHub. As you can see, there's the assembly manual, firmware binaries, the frame spec, everything else is there. So we just need to click on the firmware binaries, and it says here put a corresponding binary into a Ptfe SD card, which we've put into the machine already. Download it to that card, change it to read as firmware bin, put the TFT card into the slot on the SKR 1.3, reboot, and it will flash. So that seems fairly simple. So we're going to the 2209s, and it pulls you up lots of different versions. Now make sure you pick the right version. You can see that we've got one there that says a Z of 300, the SKR 1.3 board, the TMC 2209s, and the direct BMG extruder. That's what I'm running, so that's what we'll download. So just click on download. Now if everything has gone correctly, we should be able to switch on the machine at the back and see it flash the firmware and start up for the first time. So fingers crossed everybody, no blue smoke please. I go to the switch, switch it on. There we go, Marlin firmware 2.0.3. We're in business. So the final thing to do at this stage is that. And that's it, congratulations. If you haven't got the blue smoke and you've got your screen up like you just saw in the video there, you've built your machine. Now at this point we're going to end this video, we're not going to go any further. I would expect you now to start doing some tests, make sure that your the movement of your stepper motors is smooth and they move in the correct way. If you do have any issues with any of these, check the Facebook group, check the GitHub, get on the Discord channel. There's lots of people out there that can help you solve these little problems. Try a print, try getting your bed leveling sorted out. Again, there are a lot of people out there that can help you. I'm going to steer away from the censored bed leveling, as I don't think, for me, it's the way forward. I don't think it's going to be particularly accurate from what I do. I'm going to manually bed level it and then set up a mesh and then work from there. But I am very soon going to put an ABL kit on it. I'm going to take the board back out again and put in a duet Wi-Fi board, a copy of course, because no way I can afford a duet Wi-Fi board. But these are the things we'll do as we go on. Now you have the machine basically built, it's time for you to just explore, see what you can do. There are plenty of people, like I said, the Facebook group is full of people with profiles for Simplify 3D. There's a couple on there for the Prusa slicer. Just now start to look at the machine for yourself, see how you can improve it. My first print didn't come out too shabby at all. Room for improvement certainly, but that was my first print that I did straight after I turned the machine on. I did a quick manual leveling, which is very straightforward, and then just had a print. First layer isn't perfect. There's some issues there that I need to look at, and I think if anything I printed it probably a little bit too quickly, because it's a CoreXY machine, you want to crank that speed up. My suggestion is you slow it right down to start with, get a half decent print, then start tweaking your profiles, take your speed up a bit as you get used to the machine, but don't go, you know, all out to go really fast to start with, because you will cause more trouble than it's worth. But again, thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate all the comments I've been getting about how this has been helpful to you. I'm terribly sorry for the amount of time this third video has taken to come out, but as you know, with the current issues that we're having in the world at the moment, other things have had to take priority, but we got there in the end. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget you can help support the channel in a couple of ways which will be in the description. Most of all, enjoy your new machine, enjoy 3D printing, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye for now.